Okay.
I'd like to welcome everyone to our DPC Ed Center October call on Laugh, Will, and Testament. I'm Kathy Nickham, the Education Director, and it's my pleasure to tell you that we have some insightful as well as humorous information that's going to be shared with us today that will help us all in our journey through life. Before we start, though, I want to give you a couple of reminders. All of your phones are muted at the moment. At the end of the presentation, there'll be time to ask questions, and you can unmute your phone by doing #6 and then mute your phone back by doing *6. At any time, you're welcome to ask questions through the chat box. And at the end of the program, probably in the coming week, you will receive a link to the recording and the slides of the program by email. We encourage you to share them with others, and you may also want to watch them again and get some more tips from looking at it a second time. There's also a feedback form that will come up at the end of the program, and we really appreciate you giving us any feedback, what you like, what works well as we're gathering topics that we can use for next year's presentations and newsletter articles that we're already working on. And just as a last reminder, on November 15th, we will have a presentation by a pharmacist that will be on medication usage and the role of the pharmacist. At this point, it is my pleasure to introduce two colleagues who are both humor experts as well as mental health experts. Joel Schwartz is a psychiatrist who's also a laughter therapist. He's been on the top docs list in Philadelphia Magazine several times. He's also the author of 8 books. Steve Wilson is here again from last month, for those of you who joined us on that presentation. And he is also a psychologist and a humorist. He is the founder and director of the World Laughter Tour. He's trained over 7,000 laughter therapists. He's also written 7 books, is a member of our DPC Education Center Advisory Council, and you will also be seeing some of his articles in some of our upcoming patient newsletters. So at this point, it's my pleasure to turn the program over to Steve and Joel. And Steve, would you like to begin the program?
Yes, thank you very much, Kathy. That was one of the nicest introductions we've ever written. I appreciate that, getting to know people. They say that laughter is the best medicine. Joel, happy to be doing this with you.
Absolutely. This is going to be fun, and I hope I can get the link so I can see what we talked about. It'll be interesting and educational.
Well, I always hope that I have a good time. Then I think everybody else does, and I know you and I do. I did want to, one little piece of background information that I wanted to share is that you and I met a number of years ago at a conference of the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. And there is such a thing, and there are people all over the world who have an interest in understanding what is laughter and humor in our lives for human beings. And it turns out to be a really good thing to do. And one of the things that you and I had talked about is using humor in difficult situations. So it's not just about humor or joking is, for entertainment or for fun. That's good. That's okay. It will distract you from some difficulties. That's okay. But it has some other benefits that we would love for this audience to know about and use to their own benefit in their own lives. So we put the tagline is we're using humor to think about chronic illness so you can enjoy the rest of your life. Now, Joel, don't you think some people are going to be skeptical using humor about chronic illness?
I run into this all the time when we talk about this topic, chronic illness, when we talk about death and dying, your mortality, difficult subjects, and we mention humor, and they say, nah, it may be other situations, but it doesn't fit here. And what we would like, the people that have already bought in, thank you. Those of you who are skeptical, please come with an open mind and see if we can get you to think about putting humor not only into your life, but in dealing with difficult situations. And, the difficult situation we're going to talk about today to use humor with is chronic illness. You have kidney problems, they don't get better. And very often there's a slow decline. So there's a new normal in your life. And then when it gets to the point where you're taking medication and when you're on dialysis and you have to go once, twice, 3, 4 times a week, it's a new normal for you. So how in the world are you going to put humor into this difficult situation to come to terms with what's going on? Can we have the next slide?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about what humor is and where do you find it? And do you have to be good at jokes and stuff? What is this telling us, Joel?
Well, here, one of the ways, for those of you who do not have the monitor, it's a bagpiper in a kilt, and 2 boys are looking up the bagpiper's skirt. And we put this in because one of the best ways to deal with something that's difficult is to change perspective, to look at it from a different point of view.
And that's what this slide is showing. These are little kids, maybe 3, 4 years old, and they think this is hysterical. And how do you look for it? Where do you find it? We're going to give some suggestions for that as we go along.
Yeah. Can we have the next slide?
Really important. Sure. So we're asking everybody, which way are you going? And that really going means 2 things. Which way are you living, and what might happen at the, towards the end of life? Are you living life dead serious, or are you dying laughing? So the phrase dying laughing, we know, is really just a figure of speech. We just don't have evidence that anyone has ever died because they laughed too much. So we say that.
Dead serious is a way of life. Everything is black,
We got to
dull.
think about dead serious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then, what has stopped people, because we want to get to die laughing to have a lighter view of life. So what are some of the things that have stopped us from progressing? Can we have the next slide?
Yeah, there were things, over time, there have been a lot of things that we couldn't talk about, or people wouldn't talk about, or mention out loud, or wasn't polite. We found this little poem. Her lips near my ear, Aunt Sadie whispers the name of her friend's disease. So there's a time, I remember when I was a little boy and a neighbor passed away and the funeral was going on. We were watching from our front porch, and my mom said, "Oh, poor Mr. Ware, he had a heart attack." And she whispered it. And people would say somebody else had cancer. And it was like a superstition. Maybe if we say it too loud, we'll make it happen, which just is not.
Other people will get it.
Yeah.
I remember with my parents, I called one Sunday and they weren't home, and when I finally got a hold of them, I said, "Where were you?" And they told me that they were an aunt's unveiling. And I said, well, when did she die? Oh, she died 3 years ago. But they never told me. So secrecy, superstition prevents people from moving on. Can we have the next slide?
Yeah, sure. Let me read this up here. This is, George Bernard Shaw, famous writer, literate person, gave us this piece of advice, an observation. He said, life does not cease to be funny when people die any more than it ceases to be serious when people laugh. So I think what he was just trying to tell us very clearly is funny and serious are both parts of life, and they go on. We can find a way to balance those. We can be healthier and happier.
Right. And, like, here's a funny in the next slide.
All right, this is some humor. See, we'll put it up there, and then we'll describe it. Let's give the people who are watching this a few seconds to get this. The caption is, maybe you can take it with you. And it's got a hearse pulling a U-Haul truck. And I often wondered what's in there. Well, I think Woody Allen said, "I'm not. I don't think there's really an afterlife, but I am going to take a change of underwear." And so he had, made a funny comment. Woody Allen also said, "I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens." Sometimes, people show us there's another way to look at things.
And can we get the next slide? Because maybe the skeptical people are wondering, how can we possibly have a slide like that? But there are 3 key points. The first point is, when you think about chronic illness, it isn't easy. That's a fact. It changes your life. It changes your family's life. It changes your extended family's life. So when you think about it, it's difficult. The next thing, and what we have been doing, we want to show you that it's really not disrespectful to be creative or even funny in dealing with chronic illness, any difficult situation. And finally, go ahead.
Yeah. All right, let me see if I can get this up there. Here we go. I got to be in the right place. All right. Positive daily emotions can be protective. So that we're digging into some of the science, pretty good science that has been published, findings that stress and tension, humor, anything. Those are going to make us sick. But just having positive emotions can produce a chemistry starting in the brain, things that are called neurotransmitters, hormones that can keep us from becoming sick. There's a study by Michael Miller, a cardiologist at the University of Maryland, who found that when we're under stress and tension, when we're worried, we're angry, we're scared, our blood vessels actually start to close down. He could measure the percentage of closure of blood vessels, so it's harder for blood to get to any of our vital organs. When we're laughing, when we're in humor, so to speak, when we can lighten up a little bit, the blood vessels open up, easier for blood to get to all of the vital organs and protect us.
Another good point to that is if somebody is depressed, unhappy, anxious, you do blood tests and you get all the chemistry that goes along with that. If that person can smile, the body says, hey, I think things are better now. You do a blood count then and chemistry, it's changed. It's changed for the positive. So that's all the benefits of humor, smiling, laughing.
Well, you know, most people have heard the saying that laughter is the best medicine. A lot of people don't realize that that is a paraphrase. It's a variation on a line that comes out of the book of Proverbs. So 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, people observed that a merry heart does good like a medicine. And I think that's what we're talking about daily, positive emotions. Laughter is a quick way to get these changes to happen in our bodies and in our attitudes. But in a little bit here, we're going to list positive emotions to see what all of that is about. It's not just laughing. A lot of other things that can keep us happier and healthier.
Right. Can we have the next slide?
Yeah, I remember we came across this. The headline on this slide says, humor allows us to cope with the difference between life the way it's portrayed in textbooks and how we really experience it. So this slide shows adjustment to chronic illness in theory. And somebody might say, well, it has stages, and you start over here, and you go to the next stage and the next stage, and you go through, you get down, then you come back up, and then finally you've made a good adjustment to the difficulty. And the textbooks might say, so that's how it's going to go.
But if you really have experience with chronic illness, you go to the next slide, and that's the way it really is. It's really a jumble. You go all over the place, and you go from feeling bad to feeling good to feeling bad to feeling good. It's a mishmash of difficulty.
Yeah, you go. It isn't a straight line. You're up, you're down, you're better today. Tomorrow, you're just hanging on, and it can change hour to hour, or sometimes minute to minute.
Right.
And
then the next slide is what Steve alluded to before, which are the negative emotions that make things worse. I'll read a few. Anger.
Yeah.
Judgmentalism. Jealousy. Self-pity. Steve, you want to go from there?
Yeah, mean-spiritedness, guilt, worry, fear, anxiety. I think I'm starting to feel a little woozy just from reading this list. Boredom, depression, resentment, stress, tension, tired. Who does? These are things we all have. The point is not to be able to eliminate these entirely, but to have strategies so we can shift them from negative to positive, or minimize or reduce the bad effects of these emotions. They're all natural. They're all understandable, but we don't want to wallow in them. We don't want to stay in them for very long.
And then if we go to the next slide, we have the positive emotions, which help combat this and make you feel better. And I'll read a couple, and then you can continue, Steve. Love, support, trust, recognition, celebration. Celebrate whenever you can. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, festivity, a sense of purpose, a sense of accomplishment, and relaxation. Those are positive emotions. Norman Cousins is a name that a lot of people recognize as a man who years ago was thought to have laughed himself well. He had a very serious illness. He believed in the power of humor and laughter. There was no treatment known for his condition. And so it was really getting him down. And he turned to humor. He had funny books, his funny authors. He asked his nurses to read to him. And he was a very smart guy. He said, we have evidence that our negative, our unpleasant emotions can contribute to illness, can make us sick. And he thought nature works in a balance. So it would make sense, it made sense to him, that if negative emotions contribute to illness, maybe positive emotions contribute to health. And he went on and he raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for scientific research, starting at UCLA. Now it's all over the world, and he was right. And he said that anything that will work for a patient to block fear, to block anger, to block depression, to block anxiety, that becomes what he called a therapeutic ally. That's it. We're treating something, maybe medically. We have to treat ourselves psychologically so that medical treatments will be more effective. And we know that.
He had a wonderful sense of humor. When he was initially in the hospital, the nurse came in and said, Mr. Cousins, we need a urine sample. Gave her a little plastic container. When she left, he noticed that on his tray was some apple juice. So he took the apple juice and poured it in, and when the nurse came back, he gave her the container, and she looks at it and holds it up to the light and says, Mr. Cousins, your urine looks a little cloudy today. Well, he takes it back, takes off the top, and says, let me run it through again, and he drinks it. They asked him 10 years later, what do you remember about that? He said, I remember the expression on the nurse's face. I mean, you can imagine. But again, humor is important. And if we go to the next slide, we got some...
Yeah, I want just let me hold here for a second.
Go ahead.
Before we get to that, Joel, I just want to talk about our work with healthcare professionals, with doctors and nurses and people working in hospitals. And that, you and I have done a lot of that. We're doing a lot of teaching of those people about how to create therapeutic humor and therapeutic laughter so that doctors and nurses know that there's a certain kind of humor when the patient shows it and jokes with you and kids with you. That's a very positive sign. Patient is going to do well. So I just wanted to share, we're doing that. We're in the hospitals with a lot of this information, and they're getting it. Integrative medicine these days. I love it. So,
Steve, maybe at this point, you want to just share briefly your experience when you were sick in the hospital and struggling to look for humor but not able to find it, and then what happened to show that you were on the way to recovery?
Yeah. Thanks for asking about that, Joel. A few years ago, several years ago now, out of the clear blue sky, I was very healthy, and then suddenly I had a perforated bowel, and I ended up with emergency surgery, very extensive surgery that I had to have, and was hospitalized for a long time. Now, I had been preparing for years before that to have a good sense of humor, and I appreciate humor, and laughter is good for you. But when I got hit, when that condition knocked me down, and I went through all the surgery, and there was more than one. I had pulmonary emboli, had all kinds of things going wrong, DVT, deep vein thrombosis, all kinds of things started, and I couldn't find my humor. I sort of knew in the back of my mind that that could be helpful, but I found out later when I got out of the hospital, and I looked into this and studied it, that anesthesia will tend to block your sense of humor. And analgesics, pain medication, will tend to block your sense of humor. So as important as it is, there are chemicals that can get in the way, and that plus just the whole event of trying to deal with all this, talk about new normal. And so I was concerned because I couldn't find my humor. Nothing was funny. And I was hooked up with a morphine pump. If I felt pain, I could hit the button a couple of times. Well, that was all blocking my sense of humor. And I knew I was going to be okay. Here's how I knew. The humor was coming back. It came back to me. And I had trained upon it. Every day, there was a period of time in the hospital, every day I had to go for a CAT scan. It was after some surgery around my lungs. And they were checking. And it was very, very painful, very difficult to get into the machinery. You lay on a bed. There's this big sort of donut shaped thing. You slide the bed of the machinery, the CAT scan slides you in there, takes the pictures. Doctor looks at it, sees how you're doing. And it was very difficult. And I hated going down there for it. And then one time finished the procedure, and the machine discharged me, pushed me out from that donut thing, and the nurse came over, and she was just sort of hovering over me and looking at me upside down, and she said, "Are you comfortable?" And I thought immediately, wait, there's a joke. I know a joke, and "are you comfortable" is in the joke. And I started to smile. I started having like a little inner chuckle. Wow, I'm remembering something that's funny. That's really a good sign. I knew that was a good sign. And I said, I'll tell you what the joke was and how I answered the nurse. The joke is a story about a man who's crossing the street, and he's hit by a car, and a policeman comes over and takes off his jacket, rolls it up, makes a little pillow, puts it under the man's head after he calls for help, and he says to the man, "Are you comfortable?" And the man looks up and he says, "Well, I make a living." And that was the joke. So when the nurse said to me, "Are you comfortable?" I said, "Well, I make a living." And she said, "Sir, this is really serious." And I said, "No, it's a joke. I make a living. You asked me if I'm comfortable." She says, "Sir, we can't have this joking around." I said, "That's okay."
She missed it. You're trying to change the culture at a hospital.
She was really concerned, and she was focused, on me, and she hadn't broadened out her thinking maybe at that point. Maybe she did after this, but and I said, I just realized my humor is coming back. It's still in there. Thank goodness. And get me back to my room. I think things are going to be good. And that's what happened. I turned the corner and started healing faster and better from there, and eventually got out and came back to my new normal. But the humor comes back. You got to build it up ahead of time, if you can, and embrace it and endorse it and enjoy it. It was a good sign for me.
And I think the next slide comes right into that, because
absolutely,
it clears up some misconceptions about humor. People will say, "I'm not funny. I wasn't born with a sense of humor." But they've done studies, and they found out that, without going into the long part of the study, that you're not born with a good sense of humor, you're not born with a bad sense of humor, you're not born with a poor sense of humor. Everybody has the ability to have a sense of humor, and you can learn from other people about how to use this sense of humor.
You can develop a sense of humor, whereas the neuroscientists tell us that you are born with the ability to laugh. The physical act of laughing is inborn. People who are born blind and deaf can laugh. And that tells a very important story about being a human being. If you're born blind and deaf and you can laugh, it's coming from something on the inside. When you're comfortable.
Right. Babies will smile early on, maybe 6 weeks. Will start to smile, maybe a little bit before. Aristotle thought 40 weeks for laughing. It's turned out that it's really 70 weeks for laughing. And they used to think that laughing was just a part of the human condition. But we're learning that animals laugh. Rats laugh. Monkeys laugh. So all kinds of mammals laugh. I saw a gorilla telling a joke to 2 other gorillas when I went to the zoo. So it's pervasive with the animals,
that
too.
Sounds like monkey business to me. Yeah, well, those numbers are averages. So some babies will laugh sooner, some will take a little longer. But when the baby laughs in the crib or the cradle, we don't run over and say, gee, she has a great sense of humor, because human beings are laughing, practically newborn, before they have language. They're not getting a joke. There's something that some inner peace and comfort and satisfaction seems to be connected to bubbling out with smiling and cooing and gurgling and giggling.
And Robert Provine, who's done a lot of studies on laughter, has monitored conversations of college kids and grown-ups and older people. And if you just sort of listen to conversation, you'll see humor and laughter in the conversation, not because somebody told a joke, but there was an interesting story, or they're enjoying the conversation, and then it sort of punctuates the conversation.
Yeah, it's the seasoning. It's the salt, so to speak. It's not the main dish. It's not the entree ordinarily. Another misconception is, well, we want to clear it up. A sense of humor is not about telling jokes. I think one of the best definitions of a sense of humor is the ability to see the less serious element in a situation. So you're looking at a situation and it has different sides to it. It's got a financial side. Whatever happens in life, it's got a spiritual side. It's got a family side. It's got a work side. It's got and you look at all sides of it, and maybe you find one that's not as serious, or not all equally serious. And then you say, wait, I see the lighter side of this. I remember seeing a picture in a newspaper of a man whose car had been crushed during a storm. A tree had smashed down the roof of his car. So here's a picture of a guy standing next to the car. The tree has smashed down the car, and he made a sign on a piece of cardboard, and he's holding it up to the cars going by, and the sign has an arrow pointing to his car, and the sign says compact car. And that was he just said, okay, there's another side to this. Not all sides are serious, and that little bit of humor helps you have a perspective that's protective. Oh, I just made that up. A perspective that's protective. And you don't have to tell jokes. In fact, you could go to, there are bumper stickers. There are greeting cards. Online, people are sending jokes back and forth these days. That's great. And somebody said that the get well cards have become so humorous that if you don't get sick, you're missing half the fun. Look for those. Send those humorous greeting cards. Another thing that we want everyone to understand is you can't always explain why you're laughing. It doesn't always have a logic to it. In that sense, you don't need a reason to laugh. It bubbles up. It comes out. True mirthful laughter sometimes, it surprises you. You read a line in a book that you're reading, you see something on television, and you didn't plan it. Laughter erupts out of you. And what we want everyone who's listening to learn to do is when somebody says, well, what's so funny? That, a good response is, I don't know. And so I listened to these guys, Steve and Joel, and they said, I need to laugh, so leave me alone. I'm making my quota today. I got to get some laughter every day. I don't always have to explain it. It's my sense of humor.
Well, again, as I said in a conversation, if you listen to it, you'll see an ebb and flow of talking, some laughing, other talking. And, when they do brain studies, when somebody's talking and when they're laughing, the brain chemistry changes, and then it goes back to listening, and it sort of goes back and forth. And you're not necessarily saying, well, I feel wonderful, that's why I'm laughing. It just is there part of your personality and part of your really communication between two people.
Right. You don't necessarily laugh because you feel good, but because of the way the chemistry changes in our bodies when we're having a humorous experience, we think something's fun. We might feel good because we laugh. So that's kind of interesting. There's actually there's a kind of laughter that's typically the high-pitched kind of a giggle. Hee 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 hee. Is it nervous? Nervous laughter, and it is part of the mechanism that human beings are built with to have laughter, get rid of emotional tension, minimize. I mean, not get rid of it completely, but lower it, make it less. Let's see, I'll give you an example. Imagine you're driving and you get pulled over. The person says, "How fast did you say I was going, officer?" A little laugh, a little get, "Oh, my Visa card is over the limit." And that laugh is our automatic way of trying to help ourselves because the tension is building up. So laughter is good. By the way, I think laughter is good for the lighter unpleasant emotions. If it's deep and extreme, the laughter is probably not going to be very helpful initially. But boy, for light tension, light stress, a giggle, go read the comics, get the funnies.
There was a very important scientific study in Cosmopolitan, and they asked men and women if you were looking for a significant other, name 5 traits that you thought would be important. Number 1 for women was a sense of humor. It was number 2 for men, and I was forbidden to tell what number 1 was.
No,
but humor, pardon?
But I think that's right. That's right. When we're looking for a lifetime relationship, a committed, a happy, personal, intimate relationship, Woody Allen has great advantages over Sylvester Stallone. You know, physique and looks and all of that. That's less attractive. We sort of have a sense. Give me somebody with a good sense of humor. That's going to get us through. There's an old song, or it says, "A beauty may fade and riches may flee," but that sense of humor, that's going to get you through. And if you are in a relationship, whether it's friends, a family, a personal, important relationship that has humor in it, that pretty much beats everything. My wife and I, Pam, have come up with some tips for a happy marriage that have a little touch of humor associated with them. I'll tell you, one of them is that has worked for us. And by the way, it's our anniversary today. We're married 12,742 days.
Wow.
We count every day. We know that you can't count on years, but today, we have today. Today is the important day. And one of the things that has worked for Pam and I is I don't try to run her life. And I don't try to run mine either. And that's terrific. That's working out really good.
I have another tip that when you're in a relationship, if you ever get into a fight, fight naked. It works. It stops the fighting, and you're able to move on.
Laughing. That's great. That's great.
We got to move on.
Yeah, sure. Okay, last misconception we want to clear up is that you can be serious and humorous. A lot of people feel like, well, if I get humorous, people won't think I'm serious. Well, if you look up serious in the dictionary, and a lot of the definitions have to do with being responsible. And you can take yourself lightly, but take your responsibilities seriously. So that works out. You can be both.
Right.
It's not one or the other. So
next.
Next. All right. When it's hard to cope, We need both tears and laughter. People often say, well, aren't they opposites? Not exactly.
And the answer is no, they are not. Tell them why, Steve, they're not opposite.
Well, there are two things for sure. One is crying and laughing have the same function for human beings. We use those activities to discharge emotional tension, to help reduce
right.
it. If you bottle up laughter, if you bottle up crying, you don't reduce the tension, and you can get into a world of emotional difficulties. So we don't ever have to tell people to stop crying or stop laughing, because they're self-limiting behaviors. We laugh and we cry until in that particular episode or that particular moment we're done. It might be 30 seconds, it might be 5 minutes, but if we just let it go naturally, it will discharge the tension, and the need to do that, crying or laughing, becomes more minimized.
There was go ahead.
Yeah, well, I know that you have studied the scientists who actually collect tears and look
right.
at them.
Rosalind Fisher did a whole study about tears, took pictures, found out that different tears in different situations, if you're crying, if you're got something in your eye and you have tears, if you're peeling an onion. She took microscopic pictures of these. It looks like you're flying in an airplane, looking down on a field. They all have different structures. She did chemistry of the different tears, found out that the tears of crying have chemistry in there that tend to reduce pain. There are painkillers in there, make you feel better. They're called the psychic tears. They have the basal tears, which are just to keep your eye lubricated. And then if you have a reactive tears, a reflex tear, like if you got something in your eye. So we're learning a lot more about tears. And if you want to see a great vignette, the terms of endearment, there's a scene where people are crying about a woman lost her daughter, and then somebody makes a comment about this, and then there is a little verbal fight, and then one person says, why don't you punch her? And pretty soon they're all laughing, and you can see the emotions shift from the sadness and the tears to the humor. Terms of endearment.
Right. So whatever emotions come, those are the emotions of the moment. Go with them. One of the things about humor is that, and laughter is, it's very much a here and now kind of a thing. So we want to stay in the present. The future is full of anxiety. The past is where we can find sadness, but today is the day that we have. And some of the things to remind everybody, carpe the heck out of this diem.
Yeah, we need the next slide.
I think I'm on it. I'm on slide 17.
Oh, I'm okay. I'm still carping the heck out of the tears, but go ahead.
Yes, because I want to save time for some people to have questions, and we're going to move through here. Speed this up a little bit. Don't postpone joy. Those are similar to and gather rosebuds while you may. The poets have said that for years. And Mark Twain said, life is uncertain. Eat dessert first. All these things that try to stay more in the present moment. Don't do future tripping, because that can be distressing. And pass, when you need to bring yourself into the here and now. These are the sayings that will help you do that. Where can you find humor? It's everywhere. These are notices that were seen on church bulletin boards. Imagine you went to church and you saw this notice: this afternoon there'll be meetings in the north and south ends of the church. Children will be baptized at both ends. Could be humorous. What's another one here? Joel, you got this one?
For those of you who have children and don't know it, We have a nursery downstairs.
I think
And another one?
I think I'd be giggling. This being Easter Sunday, we'll ask Mrs. Green to come forward and lay an egg on the altar, which I would go to church to see Mrs. Green do that.
Right.
And how about this one? Joel, want to
This afternoon, the Ladies Liturgical Society will meet. Mrs. Johnson will sing, "Put Me in My Little Bed," accompanied by the Reverend.
So I hope that the people who are listening to this now and going to listen to it in the future get a little giggle. Let yourself smile. Let yourself have a little chuckle. Laughter can be everywhere, even in the midst, because we're imperfect when we're doing serious things, they end up humorous. How about newspaper headlines? Jay Leno used to do these every week on his late night TV show. These are real newspaper headlines. Imagine if you saw this. Drunk gets 9 months in violin case. Oh, that's funny to me. I'm picturing a different kind of a case than the legal case. How about this one? You got this?
Prostitutes appeal to Pope. Okay.
Yeah. All right. How about panda mating fails? Veterinarian takes over.
I wonder if he comes with flowers and candy.
If he gets
Well,
over
we'll have to see.
Yeah.
Local high school dropouts cut in half.
And they never do that again. These are wonderful, funny headlines. Minors refuse to work after death. Well, that's where I'm drawing the line. How about this one?
Chef throws his heart into helping feed needy.
Yeah,
well, that's interesting.
Well, I don't know how appetizing that's going to be. How about this one? You're going to see it this time of year now because we're recording this when holidays are coming, like Halloween and Thanksgiving. Include your children when baking cookies. Well, it may not appeal to everybody's sense of humor. These are things that happen in reality. These are not made up. These are real things that happen. And we know it's different jokes for different folks. So if it doesn't appeal to your sense of humor, something else will for sure.
But how about the next thing as a way, a phrase to get us through, to leave people with? Next slide.
We're going to have time to take a few questions after we do this. I think the Serenity Prayer, so a lot of people know what this is. I think it is the best single concept for peace of mind, no matter what's going on. The Serenity Prayer has the long version. A lot of people don't know there's a short version. We're going to do both. The long version says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Some things in life I can deal with, I can do something about. Some things I can't. Can I have the serenity to accept the things I can? And the short version of the Serenity Prayer is this.
Lighten up. Lighten up.
Got it. So I think we've covered the waterfront. I needed to, let's take some questions. Let's see if there's anybody has a question about this topic. How humor and laughter can protect us and help us to talk about things that are hard to talk about. I think people will have to either unmute their phones or type in the chat area. I'm looking to see were there any questions there.
Yeah.
Do you think they're laughing so hard that they have no questions?
That's right.
People can unmute. One thought is you can unmute your phone by doing #6. It looks like somebody's also typing something now.
Okay. In the meantime, I want to put this slide on for people who can see it. If you want to know more about this or have questions for us after this webinar, you can find us at laughwill.com, and you can call a toll-free number 1-800-NOW-LAUGH. Laugh is spelled L-A-F-F.
Somebody I see wrote about the tear study. It's Rosalind Fisher is the person that did the tear study. You can look up and see the pictures. It's fascinating.
And you can just Google, right? Tears
Yeah.
of laughter, something like that. Yeah, it's amazing. I love the fact that so much information is available to us these days. And that particular study showed that tears are caused by different things. They actually have different chemical compositions. Tears of laughter and tears of crying are washing a chemical out of the body called toxins, things that we need to get rid of. And in small amounts, we can get rid of them through our tears. Yeah.
Any other questions?
What else?
This is Kathy. I have a question for you. If someone uses humor, they're talking about either their chronic illness or they're trying to introduce the subject of their death that will be coming, and they use humor with their family, or they try to. Do you find that sometimes people get offended, or someone's trying to be funny and the other people who are either not dealing with it or are dealing with it differently will be offended? And how should someone handle that if they've tried to introduce humor and the other person is reacting negatively?
Okay,
Well,
Joel, you want to say something?
Whenever I would use humor in therapy, I would use it in two different ways. Number one, to make a point, and number two, if I knew the person very well. So if I didn't know the people, I would sort of be reluctant. So I would protect myself. I'll give you a very quick example. There was a woman that I'd seen for many years. We had a good relationship. She periodically would get very depressed. She came in one day and she said, "That's it, I'm done, I'm going to kill myself." Now that's a very serious situation, you know. But I knew her, and I said, "Well, look, you realize that if you kill yourself, you won't be able to make your Tuesday session." She laughed, and that was the end of it, so it was appropriate. In other situations, and I've seen the situation, people get offended or whatever, so they're just not ready for it, or you might want to ask, what was it that upset you about what I said, and start a conversation. So that's how I would handle it.
I think humor, when we use humor, we need to do it as if we're issuing an invitation. We're not demanding that people laugh with us. We're saying, would you like to laugh? Would you like to join me in the way I see this as funny? So you're always inviting people. And if people say, no, thank you, I think we have to accept that. Say, okay, I won't push it. I won't impose it. I'm not going to demand it. I'm not going to criticize you because you didn't get my sense of humor at this point. I'm sorry if it bothered you. I'll ask you another time. I'll issue this invitation another time. So I think we're inviting people to laugh along with us. We're not demanding it. And part of what Joel and I are doing is trying to help people to understand that it is appropriate to be creative and even to be funny about certain things. But appropriate is in the eye of the beholder.
Right.
So,
I'm wondering if anybody was offended or upset by anything that Steve and I said today.
And we can, someone could say now, or we could invite them on the feedback form at the end. If you were offended, you can put your comments on the feedback form. The feedback form, which will come up at the in very shortly, actually, just a little bit, also has a question where you can put comments. And if you have a story that you would like to share, maybe not right this minute, or you want to think about it, and you can share a time when you used humor, either at the dialysis facility or when talking about kidney disease, please share that with us, and we'll make sure we share it with everybody
Yeah.
else at some point here
One
in
of
the future.
the pieces of it, I would suggest that people apply the AT&T test to humor. They're about to tell a joke or show somebody a greeting card or a bumper sticker. AT&T, in this, given the person who I'm showing this to, is this joke or humor appropriate? Is it timely? Is it tasteful? And it's to that person. And if it doesn't fulfill those, if it doesn't match those things, don't use it. I remember when my son had an emergency appendectomy, and I had just gotten to the hospital in the evening in time to give him a kiss and wish him well. He's wheeled into surgery. The next morning I came back, and I said, oh, good, I'm going to use some humor. I'm going to get him to laugh, and that's a good thing for him. And I put on a clown nose and went into his room and used this funny voice. And my dad's here. How you doing? Good to see you. How you feel? Hey. And he looked up at me, had a big tear rolled down his cheek, and he said, not now, Dad. I got stitches. And so it was not timely, the wrong time. I have a list of tips for how to keep humor from backfiring. If I make them available, can we get those to people who are interested in that, Kathy?
Oh, we sure can. Sure.
Okay. All right.
Just send it
I will
to me
get
and
that
we'll
to you.
make sure that everybody gets it with a copy of the recording.
Right. A lot of times if you use... Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was just going to say, if you use humor, that sometimes people don't tell you if they're bothered by it. That's a way that it backfires. It's dangerous. You're better off if somebody says, "Oh, I didn't like that," or and then you can say, "I'm sorry. I won't do that with you anymore."
Sure. Okay. Thank you. We'll look forward to sharing those tips. And as we are close to our time for ending, I want to thank you, Steve, and you, Joel, for the presentation today, for sharing your tips, for helping us learn and reminding us how to use humor throughout the rest of our lives and throughout the rest of the day. So thank you both very much. And again, I want to remind everyone to complete the feedback form and to remind you to join us on November 15th at 2 p.m. when we have a pharmacist who will be talking with us about medication use and the role of the pharmacist. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. And again, thank
Kathy,
you.
can you send us the link, too, for the